Pune.
No high-profile celebrity endorsers, no high-decibel TV campaigns, no front-page spreads, and yet this brand has been quietly building India for the last 30-odd years. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Brands That Build India. I'm Shireen Bhan. On today's show, we have a rather unusual entrant.
I think one of the biggest multinational companies in the IT sector.
What we know about Infosys, it's a software giant basically.
Started by people who are very middle class people.
To be honest, what comes to my mind is Narayan Murthy.
And the empire that he has built up. Narayan Murthy is the person why I chose Infosys.
There are certain leaders who lead by example. They are not very vocal people, but they lead through their work.
I actually frankly do not know what they do.
It's mainly about IT, that's all I know.
About computers, hardwares, softwares.
And they are the company who provide tech-based services.
One of the biggest IT companies in our country. I think it's a huge honor and we are nobody to commend on that actually.
As you can see, Infosys is well known by a wide section of people, and that's not bad considering that Infosys as a company doesn't directly impact the layperson. But then, that's the kind of brand identity it has built for itself. All it takes to fulfill a dream is an idea, hard work and a bit of borrowed money. In 1981, 7 engineers resigned from their jobs at Patni Computers to start a company of their own. Without any starting capital, they borrowed 10,000 rupees from Sudha Murthy, co-founder Narayan Murthy's wife, and decided to create a software company that would be targeted at global clients.
When I was founding Infosys, I said, look, I have to surround myself by a set of smart, young and enthusiastic professionals, and that's how I invited the 6 people, and that's how we founded. I gave about 48 hours to my younger colleagues to come out with a name, and I think probably they had lots of discussions, but they couldn't come to a conclusion. Then I decided on Infosys because they said we are in the business of designing information systems for corporations. So that's how I came out with Infosys. It stands for Information Systems.
People who get scared, they are scared of losing. We did not have anything to lose. We did not have anything to lose. No asset, nothing to lose. So worst thing is we lose 2-3 years of our career life. That's okay for us.
In 1983, Infosys moved from Pune to Bangalore when they got their first client, Data Basics from New York. The first 10 years were a struggle. Despite getting clients, because being entrepreneurs in India meant proving themselves on a global level while fighting red tape back home. One of the co-founders, Ashok Arora, even sold his stake and settled in the United States.
Well, everything in the early 80s was a big challenge. First of all, India was extremely business unfriendly. Our business depended on communication. There were no data communication lines those days. And even to get a phone, it took us about a year. And those days, there was higher priority for a retired government officer compared to a software exporting company or an exporting company.
It was extremely challenging. Often we had to sell India before we sold our company. We had to convince people that we had the company, we had the standards, we had the human capital, we had the technology knowledge, we had the capabilities, we had the processes. In around 86-87 was when the first big move to global offshore development started, and we started by doing projects from India using those days satellite connections, and that was a whole new idea that you could do remote software development. So it was a big, we had to convince people about this. So it was certainly a very challenging environment in those days.
Infosys finally took off in the early 90s as the Indian economy opened up, perfectly timed with the Silicon Valley boom. Infosys went public in 1993. The share was undersubscribed initially before Morgan Stanley picked up 13% of equity. It opened for trading at 145 rupees a share, and today the share trades at over 2,000 rupees. Infosys also became the first Indian company to list on the Nasdaq in 1999.
In order to build the brand of the company amongst all other technology companies, we must list in the most challenging markets for financial markets in the world, and that was Nasdaq. And so we decided that we will list on Nasdaq. It took us almost 4 years to get all the approvals from the government of India, all the internal processes geared towards a Nasdaq listing, a US listing, and of course preparing ourselves to make that indeed happen.
But what really took off was its brand. The most obvious reason was its success, with more clients coming in and the industry booming. But there were other reasons more intrinsic to Infosys itself. Infosys had the right image, that of honest, hard-working engineers with no family or government backing, putting India firmly on the global business map. The leadership was clean and charismatic. Infosys became the first Indian company to offer ESOPs to its employees. That, along with good corporate governance and a cool campus, made it a great place to work. And suddenly, it became every middle-class Indian's dream employer.
Infosys always liked to position itself as a modern, clean organization with no, background in the old India. And I think the others probably didn't have the, willingness or the ability to say that. So in some ways, they were actually trapped into the older India and therefore found it a little difficult to break away from that mold. So Wipro and TCS and even Patni were really older firms, culturally if not, by date of forming.
What also followed was a conscious media relations effort. In fact, N.R. Narayanamurthy used to reply to all queries personally till the late 90s. The company also was clear that it always wanted to be respected. It chose to participate in awards and profited immensely from the indirect publicity.
There was a lot of demand for things like events, saying that in the US we are still unknown, let's do something. So then the events piece came into the picture. And then again, there was another thing that even if a client wants to buy from us, the analysts, the influencers are not recommending, so let's go out and talk to them. So in some ways it evolved over time because in those days there wasn't like a blueprint for IT services marketing, and we couldn't really copy what an IBM or an Accenture did because they had money to do all of these things.
Our founders actually epitomize these values. I mean, when I look at the values, see life. When I look at client value, one can think of Nandan as an epitome of client value. He had the unique ability to wow a client in a very short period of time. Or when you look at leadership by example, one can't look beyond Mr. Murthy. I mean, he's probably one of the tallest leaders corporate India has ever produced. Or when I look at integrity and transparency, two names come to mind, Chris and Dinesh. Both are very unassuming people.
However, every brand faces challenges. For Infosys, it came 2 years ago as it struggled with poor performance, talent retention and leadership. Suddenly, the company, which was used to being held up as the epitome of good corporate governance in India, was being panned in the media. In 2013, the board called N.R. Narayanamurthy back as executive chairman to help fix some of the problems. He addressed these and brought on Vishal Sikka from SAP as the CEO, handed over the reins and then retired again.
I only feel a tremendous sense of excitement and privilege to help take this iconic company that shaped this industry for India.
When Nandan left, probably we were somewhere around $3 or $4 billion. Chris took it to $7 billion. And then they did lots of good things. There is no doubt about it. However, we must realize that every corporation goes through ups and downs.
So I'm very confident in this extraordinary talent that we have, as well as the culture of learning. So per se, based on the basic fundamental opportunity is there, and that gives me a great sense of confidence and excitement. Having said that, there have been things that have been happening here in the recent past, and around attrition and around what you could call an issue with confidence. And so one of the key things that I see is the opportunity to restore the confidence, to inspire the teams, and I think then everything else follows from there.
Of course, during the third decade, we also saw ups and downs in the financial markets in the world, and we were able to survive through all these phases because of the foundation that we built and the vision that we had. And in the last 33 years, the company has grown from 7 employees to 160,000 employees. It has grown from $120,000 to about $8.2 billion and a market cap of about $35 billion. So that's the journey of Infosys.
The new management team is gearing up to bring back consistent profitable growth and position Infosys once again as India's IT bellwether stock. In a world where brand building is all about flashy advertising, aggressive promotions, the Infosys success story is almost like the revenge of the nerds. Quiet, subtle, and yet oh so cool. It is now time for us to take a short break, but Santosh Desai will help us dissect the Infosys brand right after this.
Some of the very early kind of elements of the Infosys story are the ones that help build this narrative. TCS, they are successful enterprise. It is, they are successful companies, but they are not inspiring stories in the same sense.
Welcome back. You're watching The Brands That Build India. Joining us now is Santosh Desai, the Managing Director and CEO of Future Brands. Santosh, thanks very much for joining us. Let's start by talking about the Infosys brand. As we've been pointing out, it's not a consumer-facing brand in that sense. It's a B2B brand, but it still has a brand recall. It still has managed to make a connect with the consumer. What would you attribute that to?
I think in some ways, Infosys tells a larger story. And the reason why it has become a kind of a quasi-consumer brand is because of the fact that it tapped into that particular moment, which marked India's emergence in a new sector, and where the Indian mind, which was always sort of talked about at home, suddenly it got crystallized into a business success story, a global business. So this whole connecting India with the world, a new way of doing and imagining business.
Since we're talking about this new narrative, how come, or maybe it's just perception, it hasn't spilled on to TCS, for instance, or Wipro, for instance?
The fact is that if you do not, make consumer products, the only way that you become a brand is if you are telling a story that is relevant and you represent something which is larger. Infosys did that because of the combination of that. It was startup, the personalities involved. Some of the very early kind of elements of the Infosys story are the ones that help build this narrative. TCS, they are successful enterprise. It is, they are successful companies, but they are not inspiring stories in the same sense.
Okay. A conversation that I had with Mr. N.R. Narayanamurthy, where he said that it was a very conscious decision to build these campuses, these mega campuses, opulent. He called them islands of prosperity because he said, when a global visitor comes to India and he walks into the campus, I wanted them to see that this is what we're also capable of. How significant would that be in terms of this whole brand creation, you think?
I think in the early days it was very, very significant because that's the Infosys experience, and going through to the Infosys campuses was an eye-opening, and the whole purpose was to surprise. I think that was very much an early part of the Infosys brand.
Do you believe that Infosys is going to have to grapple with the leadership trap issue?
It, I think, has grappled with it to a certain extent. The fact that Mr. Murthy had to come back is evidence enough that was a trap, and there was that question, because I think they've got in a credible leader. And while it's early days still, but I think there is a sense that question and the the looming shadow of founders and the whole question of whether eventually it is only a founder who will take over. I think you've gone past that.
Santosh, one important factor in the Infosys success story was that it attracted the best people. Let's see if Infosys is still a hot place to work.
I believe, yes, still now people want to get into Infosys because it's a stable company.
I know around 30 or 40 students got placed in Infosys this year from our college, so it's good.
It used to be the dream company of our age.
After Narayanamurthy left, I don't think there is any strong leadership over there.
I don't think Infosys, as of now, it's a dream job to get into Infosys. It was.
जब से सिक्का आए हैं, तब से काफी लोगों में कुछ सोच में चेंजेस हुआ है.
और लोग अभी अट्रैक्ट हो रहे हैं इन्फोसिस की तरफ.
You know, we were discussing the wealth creation aspect and how that went a long way in building brand Infosys. And today, Vishal Sikka is talking about partnering with startups. How significant is that going to be from the Infosys brand point of view, you think?
I think it's a very good idea, and I think it's something that, if you look back, perhaps something that they could have done a little earlier. But this is exactly that is exactly what is its role. What does it see as for itself a role in the larger ecosystem? And this idea that it fosters innovation, that it actually, puts money and backs it with money, new ideas, fresh ideas, it becomes a kind of a hothouse for. I think that is the direction that Infosys needs to take.
Well, will they be able to put together a new vision or not? Will they be able to live beyond the founder's vision for the company is the big question, the big challenge facing Vishal Sikka. Santosh, it's always a pleasure to have you join us here in the studio. Thanks very much for your time. On that note, it's time for us to take a break. But when we return, we'll see how the clean, good, honest image of the Infosys brand has been enhanced by CSR activities. Welcome back to Brands That Build India. We're talking about brand Infosys. Now, Infosys has become synonymous with IT, and naturally, a large part of the CSR activities are to do with education and spreading the use of computers.
Infosys set up the Infosys Foundation in 1996 as a not-for-profit trust. It supports programs and organizations devoted to the cause of the destitute, the mentally challenged, and the rural poor. The foundation also helps preserve certain cultural forms and dying arts of India.
We have documented the Kantha art. We have documented the metalworks in Karnataka. We have documented the touring theatre in Assam. That also with an agency we get it done, that one. But I will be knowing what exactly is that because I travel. We also help people who are working in Kantha or handicraft, all those things we do. Because I really feel in olden days Maharajas used to do all those things. Today, corporate houses have to do all those. Otherwise, art will disappear over a period of time because everybody will become a peon or a software engineer or something depending on their qualification. The old art will disappear.
It's also been supporting the midday meal schemes in various schools like this one, run by the Ramakrishna Mission. As a result of this, the foundation has seen the school dropout rate drop down to less than 10% from an alarming 80%.
Generally, people have to go and stand before the foundations for money, but the Infosys Foundation does it the other way. They seek the places and then help wherever need is there. That is the greatness of the Infosys Foundation. Money matter is one thing, but the type of helping without hassles is a different thing. That is, hats off for the Infosys Foundation for that.
Recently we also announced Infosys Foundation in USA as well. So initially we will focus on popularizing STEM education. We are looking at, one of the things we are thinking is looking at 100 mid-tier colleges in US and try to sponsor one computer science teacher. The idea is, in the US the biggest challenge is lack of people getting into technology. So we want to popularize technology. We want to encourage more people to get into technical skill.
While most of the CSR is done through the foundation, Infosys also has other activities like the Infosys Science Foundation, which encourages research in pure sciences. Besides these activities, Infosys is a responsible company when it comes to environmental sustainability too. Its Mysore campus has set the blueprint, or rather, the green print, in electricity and water conservation.
Infosys, clean and committed as always. That's a wrap on this week's episode of the Brands That Build India. Please do tune in same time next week for another fascinating brand biography. Till then, from the entire team, goodbye and many thanks for watching.
Focus, ideate, innovate, enable.